Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Stokes Sounds Off. I'm your host, James Stokes. On Tuesday, October 14th, church members were invited to watch a broadcast that would announce the new First Presidency. While most of you are probably aware of the particulars of the broadcast already, as one who has studied the biographies of several previous church presidents, and with the supporting background of a Deseret News Church Beat article by Tad Walsh, which includes extensive quotes from living and deceased apostles, my purpose today is to describe what happened in the most recent meeting to reconstitute the First Presidency. As Elder Stevenson and President Oaks stated in the broadcast, the meeting to reorganize the First Presidency took place earlier on the same day of the announcement. Ordinarily, those meetings are held in the Salt Lake Temple. However, since that edifice is still undergoing renovation, a dedicated space in either the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, the church office building, or the conference center was instead used. Usually, the apostles come to the meeting in a spirit of fasting and prayer. There they partake of the sacrament and hold a prayer circle, after which they are seated. Starting with the junior member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, which in this case would have been Elder Patrick Kieran, and going in reverse seniority order, each of the apostles in turn would weigh two proposals. First, should the Quorum of the 12 continue as the presiding authority in the church? Or second, should the First Presidency be reconstituted at this time? And if the First Presidency is to be reconstituted, who should serve as the new prophet? One by one, each of the 13 apostles junior to President Oaks voiced their opinion that the First Presidency should be reorganized now, and that President Oaks should serve as the new church president. After each of these apostles, including Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, had offered that opinion, Elder Holland then presented a formal motion that the First Presidency be reorganized and that President Oaks should be ordained as the prophet and set apart as the president of the church, which Elder Henry B. Eyring then seconded. All of the apostles then voted in favor of the motion. With all voting in favor, the apostles then stood in a circle around President Oaks, with Elder Holland acting as voice, to ordain him as the prophet, seer, and revelator for the world, and to set him apart as the president of the church. The apostles were then seated again, at which point President Oaks expressed his thanks and announced, as he did during the broadcast, that he had felt impressed to call Elders Henry B. Eyring as his first counselor and Elder D. Todd Christofferson as his second counselor, and that Elder Jeffrey R. Holland should serve as the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. After each of them had had the opportunity, as they did during the broadcast, to express their thanks for and acceptance of these roles, the apostles as a group, with President Oaks acting as voice, set apart Presidents Eyring, Christofferson, and Holland in those capacities in turn. Well, you know the rest of the story. Those changes were then presented during the broadcast. As a result of the reorganization of the new First Presidency, there are now 11 members of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Some of you might be wondering how soon we can expect the existing vacancy in that quorum to be filled. Regarding that question, some have suggested that the vacancy may not be filled until the next General Conference in April 2026. While that is a possibility, as we know, in 2023, President Russell M. Nelson set apart Elder Holland as the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, one day before the funeral of the previous acting president, M. Russell Ballard. As we also know, the resulting apostolic vacancy was filled roughly 3.5 weeks later when Elder Patrick Kieran was called. With that in mind, I believe that the current vacancy will be filled within the next 3 to 4 weeks. I would be very surprised if the vacancy is not filled before the end of November, but I have no doubts it will be filled before the end of the year, and I have a specific reason for saying that. At the end of each year, as stipulated in Doctrine and Covenants, section 120, and confirmed in the Church Auditing Department report each April, the Council on the Disposition of the Tithes, which is comprised of the members of the First Presidency, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and the presiding bishopric, meets together to evaluate the church budget for the current year and to set the budget for the following year before an audit of those budgets by the Church Accounting Department to provide reasonable assurance regarding contributions received, expenditures made, and the safeguarding of church assets, close quotes. Since that council involves all three groups, the First Presidency, Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and the presiding bishopric, the apostolic vacancy will need to be filled before the convening of that council for 2025. Having said that, I also previously shared my theories and observations relating to the anticipated changes in the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles in a previous video on this channel. Although I could not have been more incorrect about my projections for the membership of the new First Presidency, I have been praying for my own assurance that whoever was called to the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles are the ones whom the Lord would have serve in those roles at this time. Having already prayed for and having received such a witness that President Oakes' new role as prophet was foreordained by the Lord, I gratefully watched the announcement of the new First Presidency live as it happened, and I have watched that announcement at least a dozen additional times since Tuesday. And from the moment President Oakes announced the calls of Presidents Henry B. Eyring, D. Todd Christofferson, and Jeffrey R. Holland, I have felt and have come to know for myself, independent of anything else but the Spirit, that those calls were each inspired of the Lord. So I gratefully share my witness that President Dallin H. Oakes is the true and living prophet of the Lord's true and living church, and that we will be blessed as we follow his prophetic counsel. I likewise testify that the new roles of Presidents Henry B. Eyring, D. Todd Christofferson, and Jeffrey R. Holland are similarly divinely inspired, and that I know that the Lord has prepared the next man who will be called to the holy apostleship, and has prepared President Oakes and the other apostles to receive revelation regarding whomever that should be, even and especially if that means it will be someone I have not projected or predicted. I have received that witness. If any of you watching this video has not had the opportunity to obtain your own witness on any of this, there is no time like the present to change that. I can promise that if you pray for that witness with real intent, you will receive it for yourselves. I am grateful for that witness and for my personal opportunity to share it here. I would just note one other thing. During the broadcast, President Oakes said, quote, "Most recently, we've been led by a magnificent prophet of the Lord, President Russell M. Nelson. We have much work to do to fulfill the challenges he has given us, and there is more yet to come, of which I testify." Close quote. During the conclusion of General Conference weekend at the beginning of this month, President Oakes also said the following, quote, As of the April 2025 General Conference, President Russell M. Nelson had announced the construction of 200 new temples. He loved to announce new temples at the conclusion of each General Conference, and we all rejoiced with him. However, with the large number of temples now in the very earliest phases of planning and construction, it is appropriate that we slow down the announcement of new temples. Therefore, with the approval of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, we will not announce any new temples at this conference. We will now move forward in providing the ordinances of the temple to members of the church throughout the world, including when and where to announce the construction of new temples. Close quote. So we know from those statements that temple construction will play a prominent role in the prophetic administration of President Dallin H. Oaks. During the last few years, it has been customary for a major announcement about temple construction to be released almost every week at 2 p.m. Mountain Time on Monday or Tuesday. Will that continue? We also know that there are currently 4 temples with dedication scheduled, as the Grand Junction, Colorado temple was dedicated by President Holland as scheduled on this Sabbath morning. 4 others with major construction completed that have just been waiting for the announcement of their opening arrangements by the First Presidency. 44 others at various construction stages, and another 9 for which full-scale construction is currently pending, assuming that the groundbreaking for the Kumasi Ghana took place as scheduled on Saturday morning, which it did. Above and beyond that, only one other temple, Cape Town, South Africa, currently has a groundbreaking scheduled. Another 46 temples have had sites confirmed. 14 of those 46 are still awaiting the release of their respective exterior renderings, and 64 other temples have been announced but have not yet had any official information confirmed. So just in terms of temple construction, there is much for the First Presidency to move along. But in addition to that, as I believe I mentioned in another video, I heard anecdotally that at least one of the leaders of the church had reportedly seen Presidents Oaks and Eyring exiting a meeting with President Nelson and marveling at the fact that he had just outlined the timing and specifics of instructions the Lord had given him for the church for the next several years, bearing in mind that I don't know whether or not anything like that actually occurred. If any of it is true, then there may have been instructions from the Lord through President Nelson that he may not have had the chance to implement himself. I think that's a major part of the reason that President Oaks felt impressed to retain President Eyring in the new First Presidency. The wording President Oaks used in the broadcast relating to the work that President Nelson left them to do does suggest to me that there are other things aside from temple news that we can expect during President Oaks' prophetic administration. What all of that may involve or entail is not clear at this time. But as President Nelson said very early in his prophetic administration, quote, "We're witnesses to a process of restoration. If you think the church has been fully restored, you're just seeing the beginning. There is much more to come. Wait till next year, and then the next year. Eat your vitamin pills, get your rest. It's going to be exciting." Close quote. So between the quotes of President Nelson and President Oaks, there will be much more ahead. I don't know how frequently or regularly things may be announced under President Oaks' prophetic direction, but we do have the prescription of his predecessors suggesting that the church is just building up for what's to come. With all of that in mind, I invite you all to stay tuned here for my coverage of the latest updates from the Church News, the Newsroom, and the Church of Jesus Christ Temple sites. I'll be sure to pass word of those developments along to you all here as soon as time and my circumstances allow me to do so. In the meantime, that does it for now. All comments are, as always, welcome and appreciated on any video or any short at any time, as long as all such feedback is made in accordance with the established guidelines. I hope that any of you who would like to share anything will take your opportunity to sound off in the comments section below. If you liked what you watched here and would like to stay informed of newly added videos or shorts, please consider subscribing to receive the applicable updates from this channel. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Until next time, I wish you all the best and pray that the Lord will bless you all in everything you do.